At my 60th birthday, after years of secretly supporting my son and daughter-in-law, she looked me in the eye and called me a useless burden, unfit even to babysit my own grandkids. My heart shattered, but something snapped into place instead. The next morning, I took the first step to reclaim my life. This is a story about finding my voice after decades of sacrifice. If you've ever felt invisible, listen closely. Like, share, and let us know where you're listening from. Eleanor, a woman who had always found quiet joy in meticulous preparation, hummed softly as she arranged a vase of white lilies on her small dining table. Today was her 60th birthday, a milestone she'd approached with a blend of apprehension and hopeful anticipation. Her modest apartment, usually a sanctuary of peaceful solitude, was alive with the promise of celebration. Every detail had been carefully considered, from the shimmering confetti scattered sparingly on the tablecloth to the aroma of David's favorite rosemary-infused chicken wafting from the oven. She wanted everything to be perfect, a warm and inviting space for the people she loved most. As the evening unfolded, the apartment began to fill with warmth and laughter. First came David, her son, with his wife Chloe and their two children, Lily and Sam. Soon after, a few close friends arrived, bringing with them a cheerful cacophony of greetings and well wishes. The initial hours were a blur of genuine affection, clinking glasses, and the comfortable chatter of familiar voices. Eleanor felt a comforting sense of belonging, a rare moment where all the disparate pieces of her life seemed to coalesce into a harmonious whole. Her friends, knowing her simple tastes, presented her with thoughtful gifts: a new gardening tool set, a fragrant artisanal soap, a hand-knitted shawl. Each gift was unwrapped with genuine appreciation. Then came David's offering, a beautifully bound leather travel journal. Its pages, crisp and inviting, seemed to whisper promises of far-off lands and undiscovered adventures. Eleanor's eyes lit up. For years, her dreams of travel had been tucked away, gathering dust alongside other youthful aspirations. This journal, however, reignited a flicker of wanderlust she thought had long since been extinguished. It made her imagine sandy beaches, ancient ruins, and the majestic vistas she'd only ever seen in books. As she held the journal, a wave of bittersweet memories washed over her. She thought of the many quiet sacrifices she had made over the years, often unseen and unacknowledged. There was the family home, the one she'd inherited from her parents, filled with a lifetime of cherished memories. She had sold it a decade ago, not for her own benefit, but to help David and Chloe make a substantial down payment on their sprawling suburban house, allowing them to start their married life without the crushing burden of a hefty initial loan. She had moved into this smaller, less expensive apartment, telling them it was for simplicity, when in truth it was to ensure they had a good start. And then there was the ongoing secret, the substantial monthly sum she wired from a joint account, ostensibly set up for her future security, but used almost exclusively to quietly cover their mortgage payments whenever they faced one of their frequent financial challenges. She did it out of love, a desire to ease their burdens, to ensure their stability, and perhaps a quiet hope that her generosity would bind them closer, securing her place in their lives. Inspired by the journal and the feeling of rediscovered possibility, Eleanor looked at her grandchildren, Lily and Sam, bright-eyed and full of youthful energy. "You know," she mused, a soft smile gracing her lips, "this journal makes me want to visit the Grand Canyon. Imagine seeing that majestic view. Maybe," she added, her gaze drifting towards the children, "we could even go together, the three of us, one day." It was a simple, heartfelt suggestion, a vision of sharing a profound experience with the next generation. But the light in the room and in Eleanor's heart flickered and dimmed. Chloe, who had been chatting animatedly with one of Eleanor's friends, suddenly turned, her eyes narrowing imperceptibly. Her smile, which had seemed so genial moments before, now held a disconcerting edge. "Don't be ridiculous, Eleanor," Chloe stated, her voice sharp, cutting through the pleasant hum of conversation. "The kids need proper supervision, someone who can actually keep up with them, not babysitting from someone who can barely take care of herself anymore." Eleanor felt the words land like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. She stared at Chloe, stunned, trying to comprehend the sudden shift in tone, the unexpected cruelty. But Chloe wasn't finished. Her voice, though remaining saccharine, delivered a second, more potent thrust. "Honestly, you're always inserting yourself, acting like you're still needed. Let's be honest, Eleanor. You're becoming a useless burden. The polite murmur of the party died down, replaced by a suffocating silence. David, who had been standing beside Chloe, suddenly found the intricate pattern of his shoes utterly fascinating, his gaze fixed downwards, unable or unwilling to meet his mother's eyes. Lily and Sam, sensitive and perceptive, looked mortified, their innocent faces etched with embarrassment and confusion. Eleanor's friends exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure how to respond to such an open act of blatant disrespect. The festive atmosphere evaporated, leaving behind a thick pall of humiliation. Eleanor, her cheeks burning, felt an overwhelming urge to escape. Without a word, she turned and walked stiffly toward the small kitchen, leaving the hushed, awkward silence in her wake. The party inevitably ended abruptly. The remaining guests, sensing the irreparable damage, made their excuses and departed quickly, leaving only David, Chloe, Lily, and Sam. David mumbled a few incoherent apologies, his eyes still avoiding hers, his discomfort palpable. Chloe, however, maintained a serene, almost defiant expression, her gaze meticulously avoiding Eleanor's. She gathered her children with a brisk efficiency, offering no apology, no acknowledgement of the venom she had just unleashed. The front door closed with a quiet click, sealing Eleanor in the sudden echoing silence of her apartment. Eleanor stood motionless for a long moment, the silence amplifying the ringing in her ears. Then a shudder ran through her, and she stumbled into the small bathroom, locking the door behind her. The tears came then, hot and stinging, a torrent of grief and betrayal that had been building for years. She sank to the floor, her body shaking with sobs. To be called a useless burden, a woman who couldn't take care of herself, while she had secretly, painstakingly, ensured their financial stability for years, paying their very mortgage. The irony was a bitter pill, choked down with each agonizing gasp. As the storm of tears slowly subsided, a quiet voice, long dormant, began to surface in her mind. It was her mother's voice, firm yet loving, a mantra from her own childhood. Never let them see they've hurt you, Eleanor. Rise above it. The words resonated deep within her, a surprising spark in the ashes of her humiliation. Slowly, Eleanor pushed herself up, her muscles aching, but her resolve hardening. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, her eyes red and swollen, but a newfound glint of steely determination replacing the raw pain. She straightened her shoulders, a small but significant act of defiance, not against Chloe, but against the weakness she felt within herself. The first rays of morning light streamed through her window, painting the apartment in a soft, hopeful glow. Eleanor, still dressed in the clothes from the night before, sat at her kitchen table, a telephone receiver in her hand. The decision, born in the darkest hours of the night, was now clear and unwavering. Her fingers, though trembling slightly, dialed the familiar number for her bank. When a calm voice answered, Eleanor stated her request in a clear, steady tone. Yes, I would like to freeze the joint account I hold with David Collins, specifically the one from which the automated mortgage payments are drawn. There was a brief pause on the other end. Are you sure, Mrs. Collins? The bank representative asked, a note of surprise in her voice. Eleanor took a deep breath, the taste of self-respect, long forgotten, stirring on her tongue. Yes, she affirmed, her voice stronger than she thought possible. I am absolutely sure. The morning light, usually a comforting presence in Eleanor's small apartment, felt stark and unforgiving. She sat at her kitchen table, a half-empty mug of cold tea forgotten beside her. The humiliation from the previous night, Chloe's cruel words, useless burden, still echoed in her mind, fresh and raw. Yet beneath the stinging pain, a new kind of clarity was slowly emerging, like the sun burning off a dense fog. The long years of quiet capitulation, of hoping for affection that never fully materialized, now laid bare in the harsh light of truth. She thought back to Chloe's arrival in their lives, a whirlwind of charm and effervescent energy. At first, Eleanor had been delighted. David, her only son, seemed genuinely happy, but even then, Eleanor's late husband, Harold, a man of quiet wisdom and keen observation, had harbored reservations. She's a little too polished, Eleanor, he'd remarked once, a subtle furrow in his brow, and a bit too quick to dismiss others' opinions. Eleanor, ever the optimist, had brushed aside his concerns, attributing them to Harold's protective nature. She wanted to believe in the best of everyone, especially those who brought joy to her son. But Harold's instincts had been eerily accurate. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Chloe had begun to exert her influence. Family visits grew less frequent, always accompanied by a litany of excuses. The children had a sudden cold. They were too busy with extracurriculars. Chloe had a prior engagement. Eleanor's attempts to arrange outings with Lily and Sam were often intercepted, met with vague promises that never materialized. It was a subtle, systematic reduction of access, a slow tightening of the circle around her grandchildren, until Eleanor felt like an outsider looking in. Harold's death 5 years ago had only exacerbated the situation. His passing had left a gaping void in Eleanor's life, and Chloe, rather than offering comfort, had used it as an opportunity to further isolate her. "The children are so sensitive to grief, Eleanor," she'd explained with a sweet, patronizing tone. "They need stability, not constant reminders of sadness. Perhaps it's best if you don't see them as often for a while." Eleanor, drowning in her own sorrow, had accepted this, believing it was for the children's good, unaware she was slowly being erased from their daily lives. Then came David's confession, a desperate plea for help that had pulled Eleanor further into their web. His contracting business, once thriving, had hit a rough patch. Cash flow problems, unexpected project delays, rising material costs. He'd called her late one evening, his voice strained, admitting their risk of losing their home, the very house Eleanor had helped them secure. The thought of her son and his family becoming homeless, particularly the grandchildren, had been unbearable. Without a second thought, driven by an overwhelming mother's instinct, Eleanor had offered the only solution she could imagine. She proposed selling her and Harold's paid-off, comfortable family home, the one filled with 4 decades of memories. She would move into a small, affordable apartment, using the proceeds from the sale to provide them with a substantial cash infusion, not just for a down payment, but enough to stabilize their finances. Her dear friend Brenda, ever practical and fiercely loyal, had voiced her alarm. "Eleanor, are you mad?" Brenda had exclaimed, her voice laced with worry. "You're sacrificing your security, your legacy, for them. What about your future?" Eleanor, ever the resilient one, had brushed off Brenda's concerns, convinced she was doing the right thing. That family came first. What Brenda, and indeed David and Chloe, didn't know was the full extent of Eleanor's sacrifice. After the sale of her home and the initial financial relief it provided David and Chloe, Eleanor had gone a step further. She'd quietly set up a separate bank account, channeling a significant portion of Harold's life insurance payout into it. From this account, she initiated a secret automatic transfer directly to their mortgage lender each month. "Just until you get back on your feet, David," she'd told him, framing it as a temporary measure, a quiet safety net, when in reality it had become a permanent fixture for years. She'd covered their mortgage, their lifestyle, their comfort, all while living frugally herself. As Eleanor sat there, the memories resurfaced with a painful clarity. The missed dance recitals, forgotten until it was too late to attend. The lost Christmas gifts, supposedly never received, forcing her to send replacements. The family vacations Chloe meticulously planned, pictures proudly posted on social media, where Eleanor was conspicuously absent, her presence deemed unnecessary or inconvenient. Each memory was a small cut, collectively bleeding her dry of self-worth and belonging. Just as the weight of these reflections threatened to crush her, her phone buzzed. It was Brenda. "Eleanor, are you all right?" Brenda's voice, warm and laced with concern, instantly brought a lump to Eleanor's throat. "I called last night, but you didn't pick up. And your birthday—" "I saw Chloe. What was that all about?" Brenda didn't mince words. She challenged Eleanor's long-held excuses for David's behavior, for Chloe's dismissiveness. "You always make excuses for him, Eleanor. You always have. But what about you?" Overwhelmed and now utterly alone, Eleanor finally broke. The dam she had carefully constructed over years of silent suffering burst. She confessed everything to Brenda. The mortgage payments she had secretly made, the times she had cleared their exorbitant credit card debts, even the private school tuition for Lily and Sam that she'd quietly covered when Chloe complained about David's business lean periods. The words tumbled out, a torrent of long-suppressed pain and resentment. Brenda listened in stunned silence, a slow gasp escaping her lips as the magnitude of Eleanor's sacrifices became apparent. "Oh, Eleanor," Brenda finally sighed, her voice heavy with sorrow and understanding. "You've been their personal bank, their safety net, their endless resource, all while she treats you like an unwelcome guest in your own son's life." Eleanor could only nod, tears silently streaming down her face. I I confused sacrifice with love, Brenda," she admitted, her voice hoarse. "And I mistook exploitation for family duty. I thought if I gave enough, I would be loved enough, needed enough." The realization was a bitter revelation, but also incredibly liberating. It was the first step towards untangling herself from the emotional and financial knots she had so meticulously tied. Just then her phone buzzed again, vibrating on the cold kitchen counter. It was a text message from David. "Mom, is everything okay with the bank? Got a weird call about the mortgage payment." Eleanor stared at the screen, a new kind of resolve settling over her. The first ripple had just reached the shore. Eleanor stared at David's text message, the words "weird call about the mortgage payment" burning into her vision. A familiar pang of guilt, a lifetime habit of putting her son's needs first, threatened to surface. For a fleeting moment, she considered calling him back, offering an explanation, perhaps even apologizing. But then a quiet, resolute voice, so much like Harold's, seemed to whisper in her ear, "You deserve better, Eleanor. You've given enough." The ghost of her husband's unwavering support steadied her, solidifying her resolve. This time she wouldn't back down. Her next call was to Mr. Davies, her trusted financial advisor for over 2 decades. His calm, professional demeanor was exactly what she needed. "Mr. Davies," she began, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "I need an urgent meeting. This is regarding my son's mortgage and a significant portion of my financial assets." He fit her in for an afternoon slot, sensing the gravity in her tone. Seated across from Mr. Davies in his hushed, paneled office, Eleanor recounted the entire painful saga. She started with the sale of her beloved family home, detailing how the proceeds had been used to provide David and Chloe with a substantial down payment. She then moved on to the secret mortgage payments, the monthly transfers from Harold's life insurance funds, meticulously outlining the dates and amounts. Her voice wavered slightly as she described Chloe's escalating dismissiveness, culminating in the useless burden comment on her birthday. Finally, she explained her decisive action, freezing the joint account that funded their mortgage. Mr. Davies listened patiently, making notes, his expression a mixture of professional concern and quiet understanding. When she finished, the silence in the office was profound. Mr. Davies, after reviewing his notes and consulting figures on his computer, finally looked up, his face grim. "Eleanor," he began, his voice gentle, "based on your figures and the bank statements you've provided, it appears you have given David and Chloe nearly $450,000 over the past decade. That includes the initial down payment assistance, the consistent mortgage payments, and the various smaller sums you mentioned to clear credit card debt and cover private school tuition." Eleanor gasped, the sheer magnitude of the number staggering. She had known it was a lot, but seeing the cold, hard figure laid out before her was a shock. This was the money she and Harold had meticulously saved for their golden years, for the travel dreams they'd shared, for a comfortable, worry-free retirement. "Legally," Mr. Davies continued, "you are absolutely within your rights to stop these payments. There's no written agreement tying you to this, and frankly, you've been more than generous. As for your own financial situation, Eleanor, you will still be comfortable. You won't have the lavish retirement you and Harold had meticulously planned, nor the extensive travel budget, but you will be secure. Your apartment is paid for, and you still have a solid nest egg to live comfortably and independently." The words, though confirming a substantial loss, also brought a profound sense of relief. She would be okay. She was not destitute. Eleanor left Mr. Davies' office feeling a strange blend of guilt and powerful liberation. The guilt was for the lost dream of a more opulent retirement, for Harold's unspoken disappointment. But the liberation was far stronger. She had finally chosen herself, finally prioritized her own well-being over the insatiable demands of her son's family. It was a choice she should have made years ago. That evening, a knock at her door announced Brenda's arrival. Come on, Eleanor, Brenda said, her arm linked with Eleanor's, a warm, reassuring presence. Carol, Diane, and Martha are waiting. It's been too long. Eleanor hesitated, the thought of facing a group after her recent humiliation still daunting. But Brenda's unwavering support and the promise of familiar faces eventually swayed her. She needed this, she realized. She needed her friends. The reunion was everything Eleanor hadn't realized she was missing. Her friends greeted her with genuine warmth, their hugs and smiles a balm to her wounded spirit. As they settled around the table at their favorite Italian restaurant, the conversation flowed easily, but soon turned to Eleanor's absence over the years. We tried to call Eleanor, Carol said, her brow furrowed with concern, so many times. But Chloe always had an excuse. Said you were resting or too overwhelmed to talk. Even after Harold passed, when we wanted to be there for you, she told us you needed space to grieve alone. Diane nodded in agreement. She even hinted that you were becoming a bit unstable after Harold, said you were getting forgetful, fragile. And Eleanor listened, stunned into silence. It was a calculated, systematic campaign of isolation. Chloe hadn't just made excuses. She had actively intercepted calls, declined invitations on Eleanor's behalf, and even subtly spread damaging rumors, ensuring Eleanor would be cut off from her most vital support system. The realization of the depth of Chloe's manipulation was a chilling revelation. She had been so thoroughly, so completely isolated. You need to know you're not alone, Eleanor, Brenda reiterated, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. We're here for you. We always have been. And whatever decision you've made, know that we support you. Their unwavering loyalty was a lifeline, pulling her back from the brink of despair. Throughout dinner, Eleanor's phone, tucked away in her purse, vibrated almost constantly. Call after call from David, then Chloe. She ignored them, choosing instead to bask in the warmth of genuine friendship, a feeling she had starved for too long. When she returned home, the small red notification on her phone indicated 6 new voicemails. She listened to them, each one a different stage of their unfolding panic. David's first calls were confused, then increasingly anxious. Chloe's, however, escalated with terrifying speed. The first was sickly sweet, a saccharine attempt at concern. Mom, darling, is everything all right with the bank? We're so worried. Please call us back. The next was tinged with irritation. And the final message, Chloe's voice dripping with venom, chilled Eleanor to the bone. If you think you can just cut us off without consequences, Eleanor, you're more senile than I thought. Call us back now or you'll regret it. Eleanor, however, felt no regret. With a steady hand, she deleted all the messages, turned off her phone, and placed it on her nightstand. That night, for the first time in years, Eleanor slept deeply, peacefully. The weight of a monumental burden finally lifted from her shoulders. Eleanor woke with a peculiar sense of calm, a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The quiet hum of her apartment, usually a backdrop for her silent anxieties, now felt like a soothing melody. The decision made, the first steps taken, a profound peace had settled over her. Her first action was to call her lawyer, not just to discuss her rights, but to update her will. It was time to ensure her legacy, however modest, was aligned with her true wishes, not with the expectations of others. With that taken care of, she slowly, deliberately, turned her phone back on. The screen immediately lit up, displaying a cascade of notifications. 15 missed calls, almost all from David and Chloe. Then a new text message flashed across the screen. From David, we're coming over. Be there in 20. Eleanor looked into the framed photograph of Harold on her bedside table, his kind eyes smiling back at her. Wish me strength, love, she whispered, her voice surprisingly steady. As if on cue, the doorbell rang, its insistent chime slicing through the morning quiet. Eleanor took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked to the door. She opened it to find Chloe, her face flushed with a furious indignation, already poised to enter. Without a greeting, Chloe pushed past Eleanor, striding into the small living room as if she owned the place. David followed, his stance awkward, his eyes darting nervously between his wife and his mother. What the hell do you think you're doing, Eleanor? Chloe demanded, her voice sharp with barely suppressed rage. Eleanor simply met her gaze, a calm resolve emanating from her. Hello to you too, Chloe. David. She intentionally used their names, a subtle assertion of boundaries, of recognition without warmth. David, clearly uncomfortable, shifted his weight from foot to foot. Mom, he began, his voice laced with a nervous plea. There's been some kind of mistake with the bank. We just got a call about the mortgage payment, saying it didn't go through. He still believed it was an error, an administrative oversight. Eleanor's voice was quiet but clear and unwavering. It's not a mistake, David. I froze the account. The silence that followed was deafening. Chloe, for once, was speechless, her mouth slightly agape, her eyes wide with disbelief. David, however, looked utterly bewildered. What account, Mom? What mortgage payment are you talking about? His confusion was genuine, unfeigned. In that moment, Eleanor realized the devastating truth. David had no idea. He had been completely oblivious to her years of quiet sacrifice, to the monthly payments that had kept a roof over his family's head. The realization was both a confirmation of Chloe's deceit and a painful indictment of her son's ignorance. Chloe, recovering her composure quickly, immediately tried to deflect. Your mother's being ridiculous, David, she interjected, her voice laced with a familiar, condescending sweetness. She's clearly confused. You know how she gets. I'm not confused, Chloe, Eleanor stated, her voice cutting through the insinuation with unexpected force. For the past 4 years, I've been paying your mortgage. Every single month, $2,300 from my personal account, directly to your lender. She watched David's face as the words sank in. David slowly turned to Chloe, his expression shifting from confusion to shock, then to a dawning, terrible realization. Is this true, Chloe? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Chloe faltered, her usual bravado dissolving under his direct gaze. She tried to stammer out a denial, her eyes darting away from his, but the truth was already apparent. Eleanor didn't give her the chance to fully recover. She walked over to a small side table and picked up a manila folder which she handed to David. Here, David, she said, her voice firm. These are the bank statements and transfer records. All the documentation you need to see exactly how your mortgage payments have been made for years. David sank onto the sofa, his usually confident posture slumping. He opened the folder with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the documents. The truth unfurled before him in black and white, not just the mortgage payments, but records of property taxes she'd covered, significant contributions to home repairs, even payments for the children's various activities. His face grew paler with each page he turned, disbelief giving way to a profound sense of betrayal. Chloe, David whispered again, his voice strained, looking up at his wife with a wounded, incredulous expression. Did you know about this? Chloe, cornered, finally admitted it. But her admission was immediately followed by a defensive blame. Your mother offered to help when your business was struggling, David. It was her idea. I was just trying to support you. I offered to help temporarily, David, Eleanor clarified, her voice rising slightly with suppressed anger. To help you get back on your feet, not indefinitely, and certainly not while being treated like an unwelcome guest in your lives, a useless burden even. Her eyes flashed with the pain of Chloe's recent insult. What's not fair is being called a useless burden by someone whose lifestyle I've been quietly funding for years. David looked utterly devastated. Mom, he said, his voice raw with disbelief. I had no idea. You know I let Chloe handle all our finances. You told me we were managing on our own, that your business was recovering. He turned to Chloe, his eyes blazing with a dawning fury. Chloe, seeing David's anger, tried a new tactic, feigning tears. I was just trying to protect you from the stress, darling. You had so much on your plate with the business. But the tears, too quickly produced, rang hollow. David, his eyes now wide open, mouthed through her manipulation with chilling clarity. The unraveling continued. David's mind raced, connecting the dots of Chloe's past deceptions. Her excuses for Eleanor's absence, her convenient explanations for why Eleanor couldn't come to Grandparents' Day, why she couldn't babysit. He saw the carefully constructed web of lies that had kept his mother isolated and his wife in control. David stood up, his gaze sweeping between the two women. We need to fix this, he said, his voice heavy with self-reproach. This is completely unacceptable. Mom, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening. Eleanor met his gaze, her anger tempered by a flicker of hope for her son. It's not about the money, David, she said. It's about respect. It's about honesty. Chloe, seeing her control completely unravel, snapped. This is absurd. All this drama because I said one thing at a party? She scoffed, her voice laced with contempt. You're both overreacting. David turned to his wife, his face a mask of disappointment. Chloe, he said, his voice low and dangerous. What else haven't you told me? What else have you done? Chloe's eyes narrowed, a venomous glare fixed on Eleanor. You'll regret this, Eleanor. Both of you. With that, she spun on her heel and stormed out of the apartment, the door slamming shut behind her with a resounding thud. David and Eleanor stood in silence for a long moment, the air thick with the residue of their explosive confrontation. I've been so blind, Mom, David finally admitted, running a hand through his hair. Eleanor simply replied, We both have, David, but now our eyes are open. As David left, promising to deal with Chloe and the wreckage of their marriage, Eleanor felt a fragile but genuine sense of hope bloom within her. The truth was out. The path to healing, however difficult, had begun. If you're finding strength in this journey of reclaiming what's yours, please keep watching. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to follow along with the rest of my story. You won't believe the twists and turns that came next, or the unexpected allies I found. The week following the explosive confrontation in my apartment settled into an unsettling quiet. The silence, after such a dramatic unraveling, felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken consequences. Each morning I woke with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, bracing myself for the inevitable fallout. Yet nothing came. The phone remained silent. No angry texts, no desperate calls. It was a strange limbo, a momentary reprieve that felt more like the calm before a storm. Then, on Thursday afternoon, a soft, tentative knock sounded at my door. When I opened it, my granddaughter Lily, 16 years old, stood on my small porch. She was clutching a backpack, her usually bright eyes red-rimmed and swollen from crying. Her shoulders, usually so confident, were slumped, and her entire demeanor radiated distress. Grandma, she whispered, her voice barely audible, before dissolving into fresh tears. I pulled her into a tight embrace, the raw pain of her parents' constant fighting a palpable force around her. Inside, I settled her on my comfortable, worn sofa, pressing a mug of hot chocolate into her trembling hands. The warmth seemed to provide a small comfort. It's Mom and Dad, she began, her voice cracking. They're fighting constantly. And Mom's furious. She keeps saying that you've turned Dad against her, that you're trying to break up our family. She says you're trying to take everything from us. Lily looked at me, her young eyes filled with a desperate plea for understanding. Is it true, Grandma? Is that why you stopped visiting? Mom always had these weird excuses, but they never quite made sense. My heart ached for her. I regretted deeply all the missed dance recitals, the forgotten school plays, the Christmases and Thanksgivings I had spent alone while imagining them happy. No, Lily, it's not true, I said gently, choosing my words carefully. I never stopped wanting to visit you, and I certainly never tried to break up your family. I had to make some very difficult choices to protect myself. Lily nodded slowly, absorbing my words. I'm sorry, Grandma, she said, her voice small, for not speaking up at your birthday party. I should have. What she said was awful. I simply squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement of her guilt and her growing understanding. Lily then revealed the true extent of Chloe's venomous campaign. Mom's been spreading awful rumors about you, Grandma, she confided, her voice hushed with a mixture of anger and shame. To Aunt Sarah, to our neighbors, to my friends' parents. She's telling everyone that you've become senile and unstable, that you're trying to manipulate Dad with your money. That's why I came here, she admitted, looking up at me, a fierce determination in her tear-streaked eyes. I couldn't listen to it anymore. I couldn't stand being in that house. Just as Lily finished speaking, my phone buzzed. It was David. Mom, is Lily with you? He asked, his voice tight with panic. Yes, David, I assured him, my tone calm. She's safe. She's right here with me. There was a moment of silence on his end, then a deep sigh of relief. Thank God, he murmured. And then he dropped the bombshell that, while not entirely unexpected, still carried immense weight. Chloe's filing for divorce, Mom. I felt the gravity of his words settle over me, the realization that our family, as I had known it, was irrevocably changed. But David's voice, though weary, also sounded stronger, more resolute. Honestly, Mom, he added, it was a long time coming. This whole situation it brought everything to a head. Lily and I spent the rest of the evening huddled together on the sofa, looking through old photo albums. I pointed out pictures of Harold, telling her stories about her grandfather, filling in the gaps in a family history that Chloe had actively sought to erase. It was a healing experience for both of us, a quiet restitching of the fabric of our family. Later that evening, David arrived, looking utterly exhausted, but also surprisingly a little lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He confirmed Chloe's lies about my senility, her deliberate attempts to control both him and the children with money, and her cruel, calculated efforts to isolate me from my own family. He apologized profusely, his voice thick with remorse, for letting her succeed for so long. 2 days later, after school, Sam, my 14-year-old grandson, showed up at my door, his own backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked visibly relieved to step into the peaceful environment of my apartment, away from the constant tension and arguing that now permeated his home. My grandchildren's visits quickly became a regular occurrence, a bright spot in the brewing storm, a testament to the resilient bonds that Chloe could not sever. Meanwhile, Chloe's campaign of slander intensified. Brenda called, her voice laced with indignation. Eleanor, you won't believe what Chloe is saying now. She's telling everyone that you cut them off financially to manipulate David into leaving her. She's painting herself as the victim, and you as the villain. The truth, however, began to find its own voice. At a school fundraiser that weekend, Chloe, spotting me, decided to make a dramatic scene. She approached me, her voice shrill with feigned indignation, trying to publicly accuse me of ruining her family. But before she could get far, Lily, standing by my side, calmly and clearly contradicted her. That's not what happened, Mom, Lily stated, her voice steady and clear, cutting through Chloe's histrionics. Grandma stopped paying the mortgage after you called her a useless burden on her 60th birthday and said she was too senile to even babysit us. A hush fell over the gathered parents, their shocked glances shifting between Chloe's furious face and Lily's unflappable composure. That evening, David called, his voice drained but firm. Chloe's demanding the house in the divorce settlement, Mom, he revealed. She says it's hers because I couldn't support us. But I'm going to fight, Mom, not just for the house, but for the kids, for a fair outcome. His resolve filled me with a quiet pride. And then an unexpected ally emerged. The very next day, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Catherine, Chloe's mother. Her voice, usually sharp and critical, was laced with genuine shame. Eleanor, she began, David called me and told me everything. I had no idea of the extent of Chloe's behavior. I am so deeply sorry for what you've endured, for Chloe's actions. I truly am. It was an apology I never expected, a surprising beacon of support from the unlikeliest of sources. The battle lines were now clearly drawn. On one side stood Chloe, isolated in her deceit. On the other, a formidable alliance had formed. Myself, David, Lily, Sam, my loyal friends Brenda, Carol, Diane, and Martha, and even Chloe's own mother, Catherine. The truth, once buried, had gathered its champions. A few days later, a small handwritten envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside, on a folded piece of paper, Lily had sketched a tiny ballerina. The message, written in her neat script, brought tears to my eyes. I really want you there, Grandma. My dance recital. Front row where you belong. I held the invitation to my heart, the blurry image a promise of healing, of love, and of a rightful place regained. A year rich with challenges and unexpected joys unfolded since the day Eleanor froze the mortgage account. Time, as it often does, smoothed the sharp edges of pain and brought clarity to the chaos. The divorce between David and Chloe was finally finalized in November, a quiet, almost anticlimactic end to a tumultuous chapter. Chloe, ever the strategist, had tried to portray herself as the wrong party, the victim of a conniving mother-in-law and an ungrateful husband. She accepted a settlement that, on the surface, seemed to favor David. Primary custody of Lily and Sam and ownership of the house, provided he bought out her portion. Chloe, with her inherent belief in David's financial incompetence without her guidance and Eleanor's control, likely anticipated that he would struggle, perhaps even fail, giving her future leverage, or at the very least, a sense of vindication. When David first shared the details of the settlement, a flicker of his old anxiety returned. He expressed concern about managing the buyout payments on his own. Eleanor instinctively considered offering a properly documented loan, a structured agreement this time. But before she could voice the thought, David surprised her. His shoulders, usually burdened by a quiet worry, seemed straighter, his gaze more direct. "I've taken on a couple of extra projects, Mom," he announced, a newfound confidence in his voice. "And without Chloe's extravagant spending, I can manage the payments. I want to do this on my own, Mom, truly." Eleanor felt an immense swell of pride watching her son, once so easily swayed, reclaim his independence and dignity. It was a transformation she had yearned for, a testament to the difficult truths that had finally surfaced. The most joyous outcome was the flourishing of Lily and Sam in their now peaceful home. Free from the constant tension and their mother's manipulations, they bloomed. Lily dedicated herself to her dance, her talent blossoming, while Sam, with a quiet intensity, discovered a passion for photography, capturing the beauty of their world through his lens. Their visits to Eleanor's apartment became a natural, cherished part of their week, no longer needing to be snuck around, no longer overshadowed by excuses or guilt. Chloe, her attempts to maintain control thwarted, moved to Chicago. Her calls to the children, initially frequent and filled with thinly veiled attempts to turn them against David and Eleanor, slowly became sporadic, then less frequent, as Lily and Sam, mature beyond their years, steadfastly refused to take sides. They simply wanted peace. One quiet afternoon, as Sam was showing Eleanor a new set of photos, he looked up at her, his young face earnest. "Grandma," he asked, "are you sad that Chloe left?" Eleanor considered his question carefully. "I'm sad about what could have been, Sam," she replied, a gentle melancholy in her voice. "About the family we thought we had. But I'm not sad about setting boundaries or about making space for genuine happiness." Sam nodded thoughtfully. "Dad says you taught him what real strength looks like, Grandma." Eleanor's eyes blurred with sudden tears. David, once so lost, was teaching her about strength too, about the power of self-reliance and the quiet courage of taking responsibility. With her financial security reestablished and a renewed sense of purpose, Eleanor finally began planning the Grand Canyon trip, the dream reignited by David's birthday gift a year ago. She researched routes, booked accommodations, and envisioned the majestic views. David, without being asked, insisted on helping with the arrangements. "You've supported everyone else for years, Mom," he said, his voice firm with affection. "Let me do this for you all. It's the least I can do." It was a gesture of love, a silent apology, and a promise of a new reciprocal relationship. A week before her departure, on what would have been her 61st birthday, Lily and Sam presented Eleanor with an early gift. It was a beautiful leather-bound travel journal, almost identical to the one David had given her the year before. But this one was partially filled. Inside, Eleanor found handwritten notes, small maps, carefully pressed photographs, and snippets of memories collected by the children from her friends. Stories about trips she and Harold had dreamed of taking together, places they had longed to see. "It's a roadmap, Grandma," Lily explained, her eyes sparkling, "for all the trips you're going to take." Sam, ever practical, added, "so we can read about them when you get back." Eleanor was overwhelmed by their thoughtfulness, by the tangible proof of their love, and by their implicit confidence in her future, a future where she would explore and discover. The day before her trip, David hosted a small gathering at his house. It was a celebration, free from Chloe's shadow, filled with the laughter of old friends like Brenda and Carol, and new friends David had made in his revitalized business. David raised his glass, his eyes shining with genuine affection and respect. "To my mother, Eleanor Collins," he announced, his voice strong and clear, "the strongest woman I know." Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, a feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. When Eleanor, her heart full, offered her own toast. "To second chances," she said, her gaze sweeping across the warm faces of her loved ones, and to new beginnings. Later, alone with David as the last guest departed, he put an arm around her and, Mom, he admitted, his voice soft, when you froze that account last year, I was shocked and confused, but it was the best thing that could have happened to all of us. Eleanor smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. Sometimes, David, she replied, the hardest decisions lead to the greatest freedom. David nodded, a wistful look in his eyes. He wished he had seen the truth sooner, but acknowledged that the journey, however painful, had ultimately led them to a better place. As Eleanor boarded her plane to the Grand Canyon the next morning, she looked out the window, watching the world shrink beneath her. She reflected on her incredible journey, a cruel comment, a decisive action, difficult conversations, painful revelations, and now true freedom. She opened her new travel journal, the one filled with the dreams of her loved ones, and on the first blank page she wrote, "Today I am exactly where I'm supposed to be." She was no longer anyone's burden, no longer defined by sacrifice or manipulation. She was Eleanor, mother, grandmother, friend, and finally the undeniable heroine of her own unfolding story.